for pit bulls in 2005.
Okay.
And I wanted to educate the public about pit bull type dogs, and I wanted to help people understand the laws affecting them, like breed-specific legislation.
Mhm.
So I was modeling at the time, doing some burlesque as well, and I had friends that were photographers, and I had some very talented friends that were models, and I wanted to just do something fun to bring some exposure to the cause. So I ended up asking a friend of mine, my friend Mandy, if she would shoot a calendar for us, and we were going to use it as a fundraiser for the rescue that I volunteered for at the time, which Baxter Bean actually came from that rescue. But I really wanted to just help people understand that dogs are individuals, and I wanted to show them just hanging out with their people in different contexts, and it ended up being something that took off for much longer than I ever thought it could have.
Right. Yeah, it really has taken off and turned into 2 books now. Your second book came out recently, correct? Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
It's amazing.
And life.
Yes, and multiple fundraisers, huge fundraisers, which I know, celebrities are involved with. And then how did that turn into specifically working with BSL? When did you what was the first cue for you kind of to say, this is something that I need to be more involved with?
My dog Carla Lou at the time, who inspired the organization. Sweetie.
Oh.
So nice. This is why. Do I need to say anything else? My dog Carla Lou at the time was living with me in Pennsylvania, and in Pennsylvania you cannot have a breed ban. Thankfully, it's against the law. But I was worried about Denver, Colorado, who was reinstating their ban and really going after dogs. They had pulled dogs from people's homes that were registered as pit bull type dogs, and it was very much like the Gestapo in Nazi Germany, where they said, oh, this is a registered pit bull, we're coming for your dog, and they took people's family dogs away, from children, from families that love them, and I just couldn't imagine that happening to anybody, let alone Carla Lou and I. I just knew that I had to do something, and I needed to do it in a way that made people pay attention, and pinup seemed like the perfect thing, since they're also our first canine war hero dog, and the pinup culture came out around the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just really wanted to pair this idea of, here's wonderful women who love their dogs and wonderful dogs who need to be shown as just dogs and individuals, and that just led into a really cool concept.
Did you find that focusing on the more upbeat side, the positive attributes that these animals have, not just as a bully breed, but just as dogs in general, really helped reach people in a different way instead of focusing on, trying to fight against all of the negative stereotypes that are already out there?
Absolutely. I think being positive, especially as a voice for this kind of dog, I believe people really need to see the positive side because they don't understand it. Mm-hmm. And it's really hard to get people to pay attention to something that's a bum out. So I really just wanted people to feel like it's something that they wanted to be a part of, that they wanted to get behind, and that's something you can definitely do when you're giving positive messaging and you're showing here's a group of really awesome women who love each other and love these dogs, who work together, which just in a concept itself sometimes, like a lot of people just don't work together, let alone women imagine that other women can't work together, and we're incredibly the opposite. We are a giant family, and it's just amazing to see, what we can do and accomplish when we work together.
I completely agree. Now, I know that you go to different events. One of the ones that you mentioned on your site is Comic-Con,
mm-hmm.
where people are not necessarily educated about, not only just pit bulls, but dogs in general. And how did you find the most effective messaging to reach those people who, don't have an understanding like you and I might about how amazing this breed really is. People who only hear, unfortunately, what the biased media tells us about this breed because they're just trying to sell numbers and get stories out, and kind of squash those stereotypes and go, actually, here are the facts, and here is what you should be listening to instead.
Absolutely. So 2 of the main places that we do our fundraising and education is not just Comic-Cons, but also tattoo conventions.
Mm-hmm.
And they're both counterculture type of conventions. So it's people who already feel like they've been judged in some way, or people who feel like that they need to find an alternate way to relate to humanity sometimes. And so they get it right off the bat. They come up and they either see the banner and they like the pinup girl aspect of it, or they see the banner and they love the dog aspect of it. But everybody, tens of thousands of people, well, thank you. You approve of that message as well? Thank you, Baxter. You're so handsome. But they come up and they say, you know, what is this about? Why are you doing this? And when we start to explain it to them, they can't believe that it's happening in America. They can't believe that this kind of law exists in the United States. And so they say, you know, what can we do? How can we get behind you? We've had artists that are famous on television shows who have donated artwork for us to fundraise. We've had people who are celebrities like Sean Patrick Flannery, who had a pit bull named Donut, who let me interview him for about 30 minutes while all of his fans were waiting just to get to talk about his favorite dog. And it's just amazing. So many people love them. So many people live with them. And a lot of people just really have no idea what's going on. And it's scary sometimes.
Now, you talk about the fact that appealing to someone's side of humanity is really important because, you know, when you strike that chord, I think that people really do have a tendency to be able to take a step back and see it from a different perspective, which is really helpful. What I have seen, and you can squash this if this is incorrect, but there are a lot of issues in the South still with discrimination against this breed in particular, and from the shelters and rescues that aren't only working with pit bulls, also as ones that are working with pit bulls specifically, have talked about that's where they get a lot of their dogs. Now, when you're talking about the fact that people can relate to the discrimination and the stereotyping, a lot of that happened in the South. Why do you think that it has been so difficult for certain groups of people to make the correlation between, you know, discriminating against an animal, a specific breed, and the fact that that same discrimination, like you said with Hitler, has happened before with humans? So how do people not see that, you know, doing this to an animal is just as wrong as doing it to an individual?
I think what it is a lot, if you don't have the experience or haven't felt oppression, then you might not have any understanding to have the compassion or empathy, because you might not have ever experienced that kind of, you know, human neglect before or human misunderstanding. I know that there are great cities in the South that are doing amazing work in Nashville and Asheville and multiple cities, Memphis. Like, there are places that have a lot of, I feel like the main issue really actually, while I say that, is we have a lot of poverty in the South. We have a lot of people still struggling just to put food on the table, and who have different perspectives sometimes about what, you know, what it is that's fair for a dog, like a chained dog, for example, that just have different ideas. Like, right around the corner from here, there are dogs that are off leash that stay on their property all day long that are off leash. And, you know, how do you drive past that every day and not want to say, like, aren't you afraid your dog is going to get hit by a car? But their perspective is just very different than ours. So I think you have to find common ground, find a bridge that, you know, you can help somebody, whoever it is, as individual to individual, sometimes is just the way to make that change happen.
And what is that common ground that you have found? Or is it different everywhere you go?
I feel like it's definitely not something you can cookie cutter approach. I think you have to find where people are and meet them where they are sometimes.
Okay. And the fear, how do you
go?
How do you work with the fact that a lot of people...
Baxter found a bridge, I'm sorry.
I know, he's slowly
like,
crawling over to the other side.
You're handsome.
Still looks great. You just have to get him back in film. There he is.
Good.
He's getting camera shy.
He's like, I'm done with it.
So working with fear, and I know education is a huge part of that, is just because people fear the unknown. So, you know, make it known to them. I know you talked about the fact that you don't like to focus on the fact that, you know, these dogs used to be nanny dogs and they were brought over from Britain to be that, and they watched over children, so focus on their history and the fact that they don't have, these dogs are not predisposed to being aggressive, you know. Looking at the breed, and I get that a lot when people even see me walking with my dog, and I'm not sure if you do either, but going, is your dog aggressive? Has he ever been aggressive? Do you worry about that? Is that something that you worry about or no?
About my dog suddenly being aggressive?
Right.
No. I mean, dogs are contextual. Dogs,
right.
What you put into a dog is what you get out of a dog.
Mm-hmm.
And as long as you're not abusing that dog and putting that dog into compromising situations, you're not going to have to deal with something like that, regardless of any dog, not just pit bull type dogs. All dogs have teeth. All dogs can bite. All dogs have the potential to bite somebody. So we have to start there, and that's imperative. But when it comes to training, my organization especially focuses on positive training. So we're vehemently against prong collars, shock collars, choking dogs, kneeing dogs, dominance nonsense. We're absolutely against it 110%. And that is something that I feel like if people are using those methods, you do have the risk of having a fear-based issue or having a dog that's either going to shut down or suddenly seem like he turned when he didn't turn at all. He just had enough. And that's the difference, is really making sure that you hire a positive trainer or somebody who knows what they're talking about, not just somebody who says, I'll take your dog for a week, and when you get it back, your dog's going to be a disaster, which we're seeing all over the news right now. I'm glad it's finally getting some exposure.
Yes, exactly. Could not agree more with that. When you're working with people to fight against breed-specific legislation, what are some of the biggest hurdles that you come up against, and how do you face those?
First and foremost, it's figuring out where they're coming from. So, of course, everybody wants community safety. And a lot of the times the opposition believes that we don't want dangerous dog laws, where that's completely the opposite. I do want dangerous dog laws for all dogs, breed-neutral dangerous dog laws. And places like Virginia are amazing because they're breed-neutral as a state, but they also make sure that people are held accountable and held to the highest standard in terms of fines, in terms of managing your dog. And if your dog has ever actually had a major incident with somebody or something, they keep a registry of that, and anybody can access that registry, which I think is amazing. Mm-hmm. So I think helping people understand that we're not just bleeding hearts that are like, all dogs are great, I just want to snuggle all dogs, but no, I want my dog to be safe, and I want your child to be safe, and I want their dog to be safe, or cat, or whatever it is. So having leash laws, having things that are very simple to regulate, and enforcing those things and finding people who don't, actually follow the law is very easy. So I think when you want to talk to somebody about breed bans, and it's a city, let's say, that wants to come up with a breed ban, you need to meet them, again, where they're at, but you need to evaluate. I think the challenge is evaluating what is their motivation. Most of the time it's that there was a story on the news. So if we want to talk about that for a second, when you hear a story about a dog attack of any kind that's in the news, what they're usually neglecting to tell you is that there's a history of domestic abuse or physical abuse in that household. There's a history of the dog living on a chain outside, never getting any kind of human contact or exposure or proper food or nutrition. And we also have to deal with the fact that, people aren't watching where their children are, and toddlers are walking into strange backyards, and nobody should have to have that kind of trauma for their family, from the dog side, the human side, everybody. So I think having people look beyond what they're reading as a headline and understanding this doesn't sound right. Dogs don't turn. That's nonsense. So let's get back to basics and focus on that and help the legislators or whoever it is that we're working with see that, and see that, again, all dogs have teeth. So unless you're going to get rid of all dogs, you're never going to get rid of fight situations.